If we rewind history to the very beginning of the automobile, the story starts in Germany. In 1886, Carl Benz built what is widely recognized as the world's first modern car. That single invention didn't just create a new machine, it created an entire industry. From that moment on, Germany became the birthplace of automotive authority. Over the next century, German car makers didn't just build cars, they built a reputation for precision, for reliability, for engineering that felt almost obsessive. Brands like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, and Porsche slowly turned into global benchmarks. When people talked about good cars, German cars were the standard everyone compared against. By the time globalization accelerated, German luxury brands had already positioned themselves at the top. Owning one wasn't just about transportation, it was about status. In many countries, especially fast-growing markets like China, a German luxury car sent a very clear message. It said, "I've succeeded." It said, "I value quality over price." And it said, "I belong to a modern, global, high-end lifestyle." In China, this symbolism was even stronger. As the middle and upper classes expanded, German luxury cars became a shortcut to social recognition. A Mercedes wasn't just a car, it was proof that you had arrived. A BMW wasn't just performance, it was ambition. A Porsche wasn't just speed, it was success made visible. For decades, these brands felt untouchable. Their names carried weight, their logos carried authority, and their prices didn't scare buyers away. They reinforced the idea that these cars were worth more because they were more. But here's where the story starts to change. If German luxury cars were once considered unbeatable, if they represented the highest level of engineering, prestige, and success, why are Chinese consumers now turning away from them? That question is the crack in the empire, and everything that follows begins there. German car brands didn't earn trust through marketing alone. They earned it on the factory floor. For decades, Germany treated car manufacturing almost like a science, or even an art. Every process was measured, refined, and repeated until mistakes were nearly eliminated. German factories became famous for their automation. Some plants were known as dark factories, not because they were mysterious, but because they could run with almost no human workers and very little light. Robots welded, assembled, and inspected parts with extreme precision. A single production line could be filled with hundreds of machines working in perfect coordination, producing cars with incredibly small error margins. Quality control was just as intense. Parts were tested again and again, tolerances were tight. If something didn't meet the standard, it didn't leave the factory. This obsession with detail created cars that felt solid, smooth, and durable, even after years of use. That's why people trusted German cars for long highway drives, tough conditions, and daily reliability. Over time, this engineering mindset turned into brand loyalty. Customers didn't just buy one German car, they came back for a second, a third, sometimes for life. Because the quality felt consistent, German brands could charge more and still sell well. This gave them enormous pricing power and helped them dominate the luxury combustion engine market for decades. Eventually, German engineering stopped being just a description. It became a mythos, a belief system. It stood for seriousness, discipline, and industrial excellence. In Germany, cars weren't just products, they were part of national identity. Engineering success became cultural pride, not just business success. When these brands entered China, they didn't feel foreign. They felt aspirational. German cars aligned perfectly with China's modernization push. Better infrastructure, faster highways, and a growing middle class that valued quality and progress. Buying a German car felt like stepping into the future. But here's the tension beneath all of this. German excellence was built around one core strength, the combustion engine. And when the world's most important technology changes, even the strongest advantage can suddenly become a weakness. What happens when the rules of the industry are rewritten? And the skills that once made you unbeatable no longer matter as much. That question leads us directly to China's role in this story. When German car makers looked east in the 1980s, China was not yet the massive auto market it is today. But Germany moved early. Volkswagen, in particular, became a pioneer, signing joint ventures and building factories long before many competitors even considered China seriously. This early entry gave German brands a huge head start. As China's economy grew, German cars grew with it. New highways, expanding cities, and rising incomes created the perfect environment for German luxury brands. Year after year, sales climbed. For many Chinese families, their first luxury car was a German one. Over time, this relationship became deeply intertwined. The numbers show just how important China became. At its peak, Volkswagen sold nearly 40% of its global vehicles in China. For Porsche, around 30% of its total worldwide sales came from Chinese buyers. Mercedes-Benz and BMW each sold hundreds of thousands of vehicles annually in China alone. These weren't side markets, they were central pillars of revenue. In reality, China wasn't just a market for German automakers. It became the backbone of their global business. Profits earned in China helped support research, factories, and jobs back in Europe. Without strong Chinese sales, the financial structure of the German auto industry would look very different. German policymakers understood this clearly. That's why Germany often took a more cautious and open stance toward China, even when trade tensions rose within the European Union. While some European leaders pushed for protectionism, Germany emphasized cooperation, knowing how much was at stake. But dependence cuts both ways. When a company relies too heavily on one market, even a small shift can cause serious damage. And now, that shift has begun. Sales are no longer rising, market share is shrinking, brand loyalty is weakening. Despite decades of success, German luxury brands are now losing ground in China, fast. And once that realization sets in, the next question becomes unavoidable. What are the warning signs that this long-running success story is starting to break? If you want to understand how serious the situation has become, you only need to look at Porsche. For years, Porsche was one of the most admired luxury brands in China. Its cars were seen as sporty, exclusive, and emotionally powerful. In 2021, Porsche reached its peak in the Chinese market, selling close to 100,000 vehicles in a single year. At that point, China accounted for nearly one-third of Porsche's global sales. But what happened next was not a small slowdown, it was a sharp fall. By 2025, Porsche's sales in China had dropped dramatically. In the first half of the year, sales fell by more than half compared to the same period in 2021. This wasn't just a dip caused by a bad quarter or temporary market conditions. It was the lowest half-year performance Porsche had seen in China in over a decade. Behind the scenes, the pressure was even worse. Porsche was forced to carry out its largest personnel restructuring in years, cutting thousands of jobs and absorbing massive settlement costs. On top of that, after accounting for expenses, its China operations were reported to be barely profitable, or possibly even running at a loss. For a brand built on high margins and exclusivity, that's a serious red flag. And Porsche is not alone. Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi are all facing the same downward trend at the same time. Sales for each brand have dropped by double-digit percentages. When multiple industry leaders decline together, it's no longer a brand problem, it's a structural one. Taken together, total sales of German luxury brands in China have fallen to their lowest level in more than 10 years. This makes one thing clear. This isn't a short-term correction. It's not caused by one bad model or one unlucky year. Something much deeper has changed in the market. So the real question isn't whether German luxury brands are struggling. The real question is why brands that once felt unshakable are now fighting just to stay relevant in China. The answer lies in a shift so big that it rewrote the rules of the entire industry. To understand what changed, we need to look at the biggest transformation the car industry has seen in over 100 years: the move from gasoline engines to electric vehicles. This shift didn't just introduce new cars, it reset the entire competitive landscape. For decades, German brands dominated because they were masters of the combustion engine. They knew how to squeeze more power, more efficiency, and more reliability out of complex mechanical systems. That expertise took generations to build. But electric vehicles don't rely on that same complexity. An EV has far fewer moving parts, which means many of the old advantages suddenly matter much less. This is where Germany ran into trouble. German automakers had invested enormous amounts of money, talent, and infrastructure into traditional engines. Factories, supply chains, and engineering teams were all optimized for a world that was slowly disappearing. Transitioning away from that wasn't just difficult, it was risky, expensive, and slow. At the same time, software and battery technology, two areas that define modern EVs, were not Germany's traditional strengths. China, on the other hand, took a very different path. Chinese car makers invested aggressively in electric vehicles early on. They experimented fast, launched new models quickly, and adjusted designs based on user feedback. Instead of focusing only on mechanical perfection, they treated cars more like smart devices on wheels, products that could be updated, customized, and improved through software. This changed what luxury meant. In the past, luxury was about leather seats, engine sound, and brand heritage. In the electric era, luxury is about intelligence, autonomy, convenience, and ecosystem. How smart is the car? How easy is it to use? How well does it fit into daily life? These questions started to matter more than horsepower or exhaust notes. And here's the key realization. In the electric age, software and batteries matter more than pistons and gearboxes. Once that shift happened, the advantage German brands had spent decades building began to fade, and China found itself in a position of strength. Once electric vehicles became mainstream in China, local brands didn't just copy foreign designs. They redesigned the idea of luxury from the ground up. Instead of asking, "How powerful is this car?" Chinese consumers began asking, "How smart is it?" One of the biggest differences is autonomous driving. In China, advanced driver assistance systems are already operating across most cities, not just in limited test zones. Features like automatic lane changes, smart overtaking, obstacle avoidance, and fully automated parking are widely available, and no longer considered premium add-ons. They are simply expected. Chinese brands also focus heavily on real-world usability. Many Chinese cities have narrow roads, tight turns, crowded neighborhoods, and extremely dense parking. Local manufacturers design directly for these conditions. AI-assisted parking can handle tight spaces. Smart steering systems help vehicles maneuver in narrow alleys. Some models can even turn around in extremely small areas, something traditional luxury cars were never built to do. Then there's environmental adaptation. Flooding is a real problem in many Chinese cities during heavy rains. Some Chinese EVs are designed with sealed electrical systems, water detection sensors, and automatic safety responses. If the car senses water levels that are too high, it can slow down, warn the driver, or refuse to enter dangerous areas. That's not a marketing gimmick. It's solving a daily problem. Battery technology is another major advantage. Chinese companies lead in battery materials, manufacturing, and cost control. This allows many domestic EVs to offer longer driving ranges at lower prices. With strong control over the global battery supply chain, Chinese brands can innovate faster and scale more efficiently than their foreign competitors. The most important shift is psychological. Features that would be marketed as cutting-edge or luxury by traditional brands are now seen as basic requirements in China. Consumers no longer pay extra Just because a car has smart features, they expect them by default. In comparison, German luxury brands often feel technologically late, overpriced, and less adapted to local needs. Their heritage still matters, but heritage alone is no longer enough. And when technology stops justifying a higher price, consumers start asking a very simple question, one that strikes at the heart of luxury branding. As the technology gap narrowed, and in some areas reversed, Chinese consumers began looking at luxury cars in a much more practical way. Instead of asking, which brand is more famous? They started asking, which car gives me more for my money? This shift was driven partly by economic pressure. In recent years, global growth has slowed, and people everywhere have become more cautious about spending. China is no exception. Buyers are still willing to pay for quality, but they are far less willing to pay a premium just for a logo. This is where domestic brands gained a powerful advantage. Take the Xiaomi SU7 as an example. It entered the market with a price far lower than most imported luxury cars, yet it offers a long driving range, advanced autonomous features, and deep integration with a smart ecosystem. In some parking garages, the car can locate itself and drive to the owner automatically, controlled through a phone or smartwatch. These are features that feel futuristic, yet they come at a price point many middle-class buyers can reach. When consumers compare this to a traditional luxury import, the contrast becomes hard to ignore. One option costs significantly more but offers fewer smart features. The other is cheaper, more advanced, and better adapted to daily life in China. So the question naturally changes to, why pay more for a brand name when local cars offer stronger functionality and better value? This logic doesn't just affect German brands. Japanese automakers have been hit even harder, losing massive market share after sticking too long to traditional fuel and hybrid technologies. One by one, factories closed, investments shrank, and some brands exited China entirely. The pattern is clear. Legacy brands that fail to adapt don't just lose relevance, they lose the market. And that brings us to the final unavoidable question. Is this shift only about cars, or is it a sign of something much bigger? When you step back and look at the full picture, the transformation is striking. For decades, the global auto industry was led by Germany, powered by engineering heritage, mechanical mastery, and brand authority. Today, that leadership is being challenged by China, not through history or prestige, but through technology, speed, and adaptation. This story isn't really about German cars losing popularity. It's about how industrial leadership shifts when technology changes. The same thing has happened before, in electronics, manufacturing, and even energy. Whoever masters the next core technology gains the advantage, no matter how dominant the old leaders once were. Right now, China holds that advantage in electric vehicles. It leads in batteries, software integration, autonomous driving, and large-scale production. And most importantly, Chinese companies design around real user needs, not tradition. That's why domestic EVs are winning the loyalty of Chinese consumers. But history also tells us something important. Leadership is never permanent. Technology keeps evolving. New breakthroughs will come in AI, energy storage, materials, or mobility itself. The country or company that adapts fastest will shape the next era. So the real question isn't whether German luxury brands can recover or whether Chinese EVs will continue to dominate. The real question is this: when the next technological revolution arrives, will China maintain its lead, or will the balance of power shift once again? If you want to keep exploring stories like this, where technology, economics, and global power collide, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll continue breaking down the forces shaping the future, one industry at a time. This story is far from over. From